I'm going to be doing stretches around the jaw, the face, the eyes, the ears, the neck. And, it may well end up incorporating more of the body. I'll be doing some meditation, kind of focusing on this idea of the squint toward the focus, the unsquint toward the sort of more detached, and then the movement between them, and then the idea of sort of sitting on the midpoint between them.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. So today we're going to talk about the Manhattan Project of Consciousness and the making of the love bomb, kind of its hypothetical history. Essentially, it's a very interesting topic. It's a very interesting topic today. I wrote in 2016 a little kind of like essay on speculating what the Manhattan Project of Consciousness would look like if it was successful. First of all, I definitely want to mention that I understand if people have an aesthetic distaste for the concept of a Manhattan Project of Consciousness. It feels like you're, kind of like um, allocating a lot of beneficial status to what was essentially gathering a bunch of super smart people to create the deadliest weapon we have as a species, which is absolutely terrible, right? Like it's really really evil in a way that, like, whenever we've actually gathered a bunch of geniuses in the desert in the past, something like an atomic bomb is what comes out of it. So I totally understand that. And in fact, I also understand that it might be kind of unsettling to think of large scale project about consciousness, because what if, like, it's used for bad purposes? I completely understand if you're nervous about it. However, let me make briefly the case for why actually thinking about this does make quite a bit of sense and is not necessarily just bad taste. In my opinion, actually, it is very generative. It is very thought-provoking to think along these lines. Well, but before I go there, the qualia of the day actually is Burning Man qualia. I mean, we're approaching Burning Man. The reason I'm probably not going to mind altering to, all of that, it goes hand in hand with Burning Man, relevant research, and you should look into this and this researcher. And it turns out he was actually one of the members of the Yale Psychedelic Society, or the Yale Psychedelic Research Group. And people like that. I mean, like, original researchers. Sasha Shulgin gave a talk at that camp, and quite an incredible event. You really get to see this kind of a phase transition when you gather a lot of people very into art, a lot of very technical people. Most people are university educated, like solid, like 20-30% have like graduate degrees. And very conscientious people, people who get stuff done. The last thing I will say is that Burning Man is also a little bit of an exercise in equanimity. Like, if you know the amount of labor that will be involved, especially if you're, playing a leadership role at a camp, for example. Yeah, if if you have a sense, hey, you will be working a lot during that week, and also partying a lot, but you will have to be moving a lot of stuff. You will need moving furniture equanimity, and unpacking equanimity, and putting things together equanimity, and having a cold in the middle of the week equanimity, and not enough sleep equanimity, and not being able to sleep in the morning because it's very hot equanimity, and thirst equanimity. And if you have that, then it's a glorious event. Otherwise, it's also a source of a lot of people break up at Burning Man. A lot of people get psychologically injured at Burning Man. So it's a there's a little bit the problem that if the slogan is used by organizations, by researchers already, it will be kind of used as a way to redirect more resources to whatever they're doing already. Like, there's a little bit of that tendency. But I actually would say, no. Hold on. there are actually really big opportunities and actually some significant non-trivial analogies that we can draw to the actual Manhattan Project of Manhattan Project when it comes to analogizing it for consciousness. And it's more than just, hey, let's all work together on a very difficult problem for a short period of time that will transform the world, right? Like we can find a tighter analogy that I think makes us see it in a much more ambitious way. So I will mention a few things. Well, the first thing I will mention is, okay, like LSD actually was discovered in 1943 while, the Second World War was raging. Imagine if actually, instead of figuring out how to build a bomb, right, it was how do you actually get the optimal LSD experience that shows you that we're all one consciousness and that we ought to love each other. Like, yes, that happens sometimes on LSD, but not always, right? So what are the ideal circumstances where that happens? That is the sort of thing that, yes, a project, very smart people working together to optimize it could definitely make big breakthroughs. And okay, so here are some analogies. We will go deeper into them, but here are some analogies. So first of all, a very non-trivial, honestly, really kind of mind-blowing and technically beautiful thing about the Manhattan Project of Consciousness that is not talked about in the movie Oppenheimer, but it will be talked about on any documentary that you see about the Manhattan Project, is the technical challenge of actually compressing a uranium core fast enough and efficiently enough that you actually get a fission chain reaction that lasts long enough to actually be capable of unleashing most of the nuclear material being used. So essentially, you need to literally compress what would be thought of as an incompressible solid, right? But high explosive shockwaves are really powerful, you guys. A high explosive shockwave can compress an incompressible material by a certain percentage. And I asked the ChatGPT, and it told me that the precise percentage is probably a nuclear secret, and I could get into trouble probably if I were to provide like technical details. I'm not going to do that, out of an abundance of caution. But the point is, you actually do compress it by a significant percent, right? It's not like a 1% compression. It's like a lot more. And and to do that, you need a shock wave that is extremely symmetrical. Actually, you need a spherical shock wave that it causes an implosion. Here's the thing, though. If you just put a bunch of explosives in a spherical arrangement and you detonate them at the same time, the actual explosive wave, the actual high explosive shock wave, will originate out of the detonation points and grow in a spherical fashion. And so actually, by the time it meets the center, it's going to be kind of this intersection of circles. It's going to be this very irregular shape. And you're not going to be compressing the material homogeneously. And also, the material will be able to actually be squeezed. It's going to be squeezed, and that prevents it from actually staying long enough at a close enough, super highly compressed state for the full chain reaction. So the technical solution is explosive lensing. This is a mind-blowing thing that essentially the shock wave of explosives goes at different speed as a function of the material. And so you can actually use two different materials. This is not secret. This is very cursory Wikipedia reading. Essentially, not sharing anything I think is dangerous. It's just, very surface reading. But essentially, like the combination of two explosive materials at their interface, depending on the particular mathematical shape, something like a paraboloid or a ellipse or a particular conic function, it will essentially function as a lens for the shock wave. And so the precise shape that they used, suggested by John von Neumann, actually, and based on some of other work that he had been doing, essentially is capable of creating this actual perfectly spherical shock wave that compresses the material homogeneously. we will see in a moment how that connects to consciousness. There's actually a very non-trivial, very significant connection here. The second way in which this actually might be quite relevant is, oh my goodness, actually, especially for the development of the hydrogen bomb, computing, computing architectures. The von Neumann computer architecture, which is essentially an ancestor of all of the modern computing systems, was created in order to produce simulations of essentially how to make a fusion bomb, that contains both a fission component as a kind of spark and a bunch of mirrors to concentrate radiation and essentially cause a fusion reaction in a different location within the bomb. That actually required very advanced numerical simulations that it was just too difficult to do by hand. So they needed something to accelerate it. It really comes down to things like, numerical methods. Like, for example, the Monte Carlo sampling method was developed also for the fusion bomb. Monte Carlo is not actually who made it, who came up with the algorithm. Actually, it was Ullem. If you've ever looked into nuclear weapons, you will know like the Ullem-Teller design. So like Ullem was a very, very key figure, and he came up with the Monte Carlo method. And why is it called Monte Carlo? It is because that is the name of the casino that his uncle used to frequent. So actually, there's no Monte Carlo in this story. It's one of those like funny, funny stories for how something got named. But eventually, computing, the computing revolution came out of the Manhattan Project and von Neumann and Ullem's work and Teller's work. Like, that is, anyway, like, the sort of thing that makes me think of is that to some extent, big breakthroughs in technologies sometimes I think do require this high concentration of geniuses put together to the task with a deadline. and well, in this case, there are amazing applications, obviously very scary applications, but potentially without something like the Manhattan Project, without these like super geniuses out there that could be recruited, I think it's possible humans might not have developed, a computing architecture